In AutoCAD, we use lines to draw things. We also use polylines. Polylines are lines with many vertexes and or segments. Splines are sinuous lines or tangent arcs. Splines can be more difficult to work with than polylines or lines, but they provide an organic design feature that you can use for your models. Let's open up a file. Let's look at the polyline-splines.dwg file. Select it, click open. So what I've done here is inserted a series of different splines and polylines for us, plus a few little points so that we can demonstrate kind of how they work. You can create a polyline very easily. Start the polyline command, type in PL on your command line, press enter, and then you just start drawing. You can go from point to point, and you can even draw in some arcs. Type in A for arc, and type in L to switch back to a line. And that's how you draw a polyline. Now you draw a spline, just type in the word spline, S-P-L-I-N-E, press enter, the same sort of way. Just go from point to point, but instead of drawing a straight line, you'll see that it has a natural organic rounding radius to it. And even though these points are the same, the line created is very different. So if you want to edit a polyline, there are two different ways to do it. If you select the polyline itself, you can do a lot of different things to it through grips. Grips are these blue squares and rectangles. They may be kind of hard to see, but a polyline will have grips at the endpoints of each line segment or vertex, and it will have one right in the middle of each line. Now, when you hover over these grips, you'll get some options. You can pick stretch, and that's like you just used the stretch command and selected that line segment in your command. So if I start the stretch command and I did that, it works the same way. So that's a real nice, quick, easy thing to do. If you just pick on one of the vertexes, you can move it around, reshaping the polyline. But if you hover over one of the vertexes, you get the stretch option again. You also get an option to add or remove a vertex. So if I click add vertex, it lets me add another vertex, splitting that line segment and creating two new objects inside it. Now, if I go to the remove vertex, it removes it, puts it back to just one line segment. Now, I have similar options there with the midpoint. I have stretch, as we saw earlier. I also have an add vertex, works the exact same way. In fact, it's the one I use the most when I want to add a vertex because it kind of just grabs it right at that point, and then it allows me to manipulate it however I'd like. Of course, you have the remove vertex from the endpoints, but here in the midpoint, I have stretch, add, and convert to arc. Now, this is really nice when you want to radius your polyline. Now, once it becomes an arc, the endpoints work the same way, but then the midpoint is almost identical. You have stretch, add vertex, and it keeps them as an arc, and you have convert to line. So you can change these both back to a line, and I can get everything right back where it was before. So that's how you edit a polyline right there just by selecting the polyline. There's also what's called the p-edit command. Type in P and then edit. That stands for polyline edit. Press enter. And through here, you can select just one polyline and you can get through these different commands. So I have open, which will open up a polyline. If I hit close, it'll make sure that polyline closes completely on itself. I can change the width. Let's give it a width of 5. That changes the thickness of the polyline in units. So if you're working in inches, it'll make sure that the polyline is 5 inches wide. If you're working in millimeters, it'll make it 5 millimeters wide. So keep that in mind. Now you can also change the width down to 0, which will then just take it back to a regular line width. And that line width will then be controlled again by your layer settings, your printer settings, your object settings. You can edit a vertex through here, but I don't ever use this option anymore because it's very difficult. Now with just being able to select the polyline and grip edit all the vertexes, I can do everything there that I can here. I suggest you don't do it. You can click the fit option. That kind of splines your polyline in a way, but it's still a polyline. A lot of times that's what I'll do instead of make a polyline if I want it to be rounded. So if it's been fit like that, then you can hit the decurve button and that puts it right back to its points. Now you can spline it and that will create it into a spline. If you hit the decurve, that'll put it back. The line type gen option here will come into effect when you use a line type that is not continuous. So let's say it's hidden or something like that. So I'm going to change this line type to a dashed. Now, if you select your polyline and look at your properties palette, it'll tell you at the bottom if line type generation is disabled or not. Now, if it's disabled, it will draw the line all the way to each vertex. And so you'll always have a corner where it shows text. Now, sometimes though, this can be a problem. If you enable it, what it does, as you can see right here in this case, is that it keeps the line drawing the hatches in the appropriate spacing. So this corner could have an open space at it and you just can't see it. Now, you want to do that whenever you have a lot of short segments and you need to see the actual dashes in a line. In this case, though, it's kind of difficult to see, but you can get an idea of what it looks like right there. You use that just whenever you need it to look one way or the other. Now, you can also use the Polyline edit command on multiple polylines at a time. So you start the command, you type in M for multiple, and then you can select all of these different polylines, lines or arcs. Press enter. And if you've selected objects that aren't polylines, the Polyline edit command can't edit them, obviously. So AutoCAD has to convert them into polylines. And AutoCAD will ask you, do you want to convert these into polylines? And you type in Y for yes. So now all of these objects that I selected have now been converted to polylines. And I can do a lot of different things with them. I can just press the escape key. And now they're just separate polylines. You see now it says it's not an arc. It says here in the properties palette that it's a polyline. So if I type in PE, which is short for Polyline Edit, I can come and type in M, and then I can select all of these again, press enter, and then I can pick on the join option. Press enter again to close that out. And now I've joined all of these polylines together to make one polyline. Now, typically anymore, I find that that's where I use the Polyline edit command the most for, is to join all of these objects into one polyline. Most of the other editing that I need to do in a typical day for my polylines, I can do just through the grip edits. Now, splines are very similar. We have a spline here. See, I drew the lines through each of these points, and then it just kind of arced them around, made it very sinuous. Now, I can change that in a couple of ways. If I click on this arrowhead here, that's set to a fit. Now I can switch it to control vertices. As you can see here, these lines are kind of tangential to it and everything goes inside there. And when I click on these vertices, I can manipulate the spline this way. I can always change it back to fit. And the fit means that the spline will go through those lines. Now you notice though that when I edit the splines, that it does move them in a different manner than before. So again, if I switch it back to the control, and it just manipulates the lines in a different way, and that's okay. Now we have a spline edit command called spline edit, and it has several settings that are very similar to our Polyline edit command, but yet are a little bit different. One thing I didn't talk about on the Polyline edit command is the reverse button. Sometimes you have line types that will show direction. Maybe there's text in them, an arrow or something points in a specific direction. Well, if you hit the reverse command, it reverses the polyline so that that text or whatever that special item is in that line type will look the other way. Now here you can edit your vertexes, change your fit data, you can open it, you can close it again. You can also convert it to a polyline. And through there, it will keep this roundness to it, but you have to give it a special precision. Default is 10, and I found that that often works. So when I select it now, you see all these vertices. These are all just polyline segments now, but it had to create all of these really short segments to be able to get that arc. So that's polyline editing and spline editing tools that you can use inside AutoCAD.